It was my second year as an officer with the Texas State Patrol. I had already faced some challenging situations and witnessed events that made me question the nature of reality, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold that fateful night. My partner and I were on duty, conducting our regular patrols when the radio crackled to life with the dispatcher's urgent warning about a critical situation. A man was reportedly brandishing a gun at a woman. Without a moment's hesitation, we activated our sirens and sped towards the location given. The streets were eerily quiet, and the city seemed to be asleep as adrenaline surged through my veins. I could sense the tension in the air, a blend of fear and determination. We understood that every second was crucial, and the thought of a life in peril made time feel as though it were crawling. We arrived at the address a few minutes later, our patrol car's headlights cutting through the darkness. The house was modest, situated in a secluded neighborhood on the outskirts of Clearview, Texas, surrounded by an almost surreal stillness, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting for the next move. As soon as we stepped out of the car, our attention was drawn to a woman standing distraught in the front yard. She was visibly shaken, tears streaming down her face as she repeatedly whispered, "He shot me, he shot me." Her words were filled with terror and conviction, momentarily freezing me in place. I exchanged a confused glance with my partner, who appeared just as bewildered. We approached her, attempting to calm her down. "He didn't shoot you," we said, trying to reassure both her and ourselves. However, she continued to plead, as if unable to shake the belief that she had been harmed. We immediately checked to see if she had any visible injuries, examining her body for wounds, but found no signs of a gunshot, no blood, no injuries. It was unsettling. The certainty in her eyes and the fear in her voice convinced me she truly believed she had been shot, yet the reality didn't support it. When we asked if she had any family members nearby who could help her, she shook her head, indicating she had no one to turn to. We offered to take her to a safer location, but she refused, insisting on staying right where she was, which only baffled us further. After several attempts to convince her to come with us, we finally asked if she would be all right on her own, to which she nodded, still visibly distressed but adamant that she would be fine. With no other options and no sign of the man who had allegedly threatened her, we decided to leave the scene, yet something about it felt deeply unsettling, like a nagging thought that something remained unresolved. As we drove back to the station at the end of our shift, we anticipated sharing a laugh or two about the oddity of the night. Instead, one of the dispatchers looked up as we entered, his expression shifting to one of near panic. His face went pale, and his eyes widened as he hesitantly asked, "That was the house, right?" When we confirmed, the tension in the room thickened. That's when he shared something that sent chills through our bodies. That same woman, the one we had just encountered, had died 6 years ago, shot in the head by her husband, who had never been apprehended. In that instant, it felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. My partner and I exchanged stunned glances, struggling to comprehend what we just heard. How could this be possible? We had spoken to her and tried to help, yet according to this information, she had been dead for years. The revelation rattled us both, but we decided to put it behind us. There was no logical explanation for our experience, and neither of us wanted to risk being ridiculed or questioned about our sanity. We buried that incident deep in our memories, trying to move on, but the haunting memory of that encounter never truly faded. 2 years passed, yet the memory of that night still lingered in my mind. I concentrated on my duties when I was tasked with training a new recruit, an enthusiastic beginner eager to prove himself. We were out on another night shift when a call came through the radio, catching us off guard. It was from the same house. The voice on the radio was all too recognizable, sending a chilling shiver down my spine. It was the same woman. Despite all my training, I couldn't shake off the fear creeping up my back. Something deep inside told me this wouldn't be just another routine call. However, I had no option but to return to that house and uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting something beyond my comprehension. As we arrived at the residence and approached, the radio in our vehicle began emitting static, a rare phenomenon, as if the atmosphere around the place was charged with electricity that interfered with our gear. My heart raced as we exited the patrol car, and the rookie next to me seemed to sense the same unease with every step we took toward the entrance. The static grew stronger until all we could hear was an incessant buzzing. The door swung open before we could knock, and there she stood, the woman looking just as she did before, with that haunted, desperate look. However, this time, instead of saying he shot me, she merely pointed inside the house and stated, "He's in there." My instincts kicked in, and without hesitation, I drew my weapon, signaling for the rookie to do the same. We entered the house cautiously, our hearts racing. The place was silent except for the sound of our footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The tension felt almost palpable, as if something significant was about to unfold. We moved slowly through the rooms, checking every nook and cranny, and finally, in the last bedroom, we discovered a man. He was hiding, as if he was aware we were coming for him, his face reflecting a mix of shock and fear. But there was no time to pause. We apprehended him immediately. As I cuffed him, a terrifying realization dawned on me. His description matched the husband who had killed that woman years earlier. The discovery was both terrifying and clarifying. After all those years, we had finally found the man responsible for the shooting, all thanks to her, the very woman who had somehow led us right to him. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her murder. From that moment on, we never received another call from that house. The case was resolved, allowing the woman to finally find peace. Yet, even now, the memory of that night continues to haunt me. I can't help but ponder whether it was merely a coincidence or something deeper. Was she somehow guiding us to her murderer, seeking justice from the afterlife? These questions linger unanswered, and perhaps they always will. However, one thing is undeniable. That house, that woman, and that eerie experience will forever remain etched in my mind. A police officer's existence is filled with unpredictability and encounters with the inexplicable. But what transpired in that house surpassed anything I could have envisioned. Even years later, sharing this story sends a shiver down my spine, reminding me that sometimes the past manages to make its presence felt, even if it is through a voice from beyond the grave. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this. Thank you. Now let's move on to the next story. My partner, Henry, and I were called to respond to an alarm that had gone off in an old office building located in downtown Seattle. The structure, its facade worn down by time and pollution, had been converted into medical offices a few years earlier. During the day, it combined the charm of the past with modern functionality, but at night, its dark windows and cold walls created an unsettling atmosphere. We arrived around 2 a.m., a time when the city was silent except for the occasional sound of distant cars and the rustling of tree leaves. The building was completely locked up with no obvious signs of activity, save for the lights from a 24-hour pharmacy next door. Its pale glow fell across the sidewalks and parking lot, giving everything a slightly eerie quality. I sensed that something was off as soon as we parked our patrol car. We were greeted by an elderly doorman who looked tired and worried. He seemed confused about why the alarm had gone off at all, given the hour and the location. "Good evening, officers. I really don't understand what might have happened. None of the tenants are here at this time. It's very strange," he said, shaking his head as he led us to the main entrance. The motion sensor that triggered the alarm was located on the second-floor door in one of the medical offices. When we reached the door leading to the stairwell, we discovered it was locked. The doorman, visibly flustered, informed us that he did not have the key for that door. It was clear something was amiss. He mentioned that a locksmith had already been called and was on the way. While we waited, the silence of the building was almost deafening, interrupted only by the occasional creaks from the old structure reacting to the cool, early morning air. A few minutes later, a man arrived claiming to be the locksmith. He wore a simple uniform with a security company's name embroidered on his chest. His hair was graying, his expression serious, and he appeared to be in his early 50s. Each of his movements was meticulous and precise, as though he had performed this task countless times before. "Good evening, officers," he said in a deep, steady voice. "Sorry for the delay. I'll get this door open for you." As he unlocked the door, I noticed he maintained a calm demeanor, but there was something unsettling about the way he carried himself, as if he knew something we didn't. Once the door finally opened, we were met by a dimly lit corridor with walls that had seen better days. A faint smell of mildew lingered in the air, creating an oppressive atmosphere, as though the building were guarding a long-forgotten secret. The locksmith led us toward the elevator. The stairs are quite old, poorly lit, and winding. The elevator is a better option, he explained. Although Henry and I were wary, we agreed, believing it to be safer than climbing the old stairs in a building like this. When the elevator doors opened onto the second floor, we were greeted by darkness that seemed to swallow everything around it. Only a single light bulb at the far end of the hallway provided a weak glow, flickering as if it might go out at any moment. The scene was grim, and the silence was almost tangible, creating an atmosphere of growing tension. Henry stood on my right, gripping his flashlight tightly and pointing it ahead as we began to walk. The hallway seemed endless, with each step echoing against the narrow walls as if someone or something was watching us. My mind conjured up all sorts of scenarios, but I had to keep my cool and focus on the task. As we advanced, we checked each door lining the corridor. These were simple offices, some with plaques indicating specialties like dermatology, cardiology, and psychology. So far, every door was locked, and there was no sign of a break-in. Still, the tension mounted with each room we cleared. The farther we went without finding anything, the more unsettling it felt. Finally, we reached the last office, whose door was unlocked. Henry looked at me and I nodded, signaling we should go in. We carefully pushed the door open, revealing an empty space divided into several small examination rooms and a reception area. It was clean and organized but carried a distinct feeling of abandonment, as if no one had set foot there for a long time. We searched the place thoroughly and found nothing out of the ordinary. Everything seemed to be in order, yet a nagging sense that something was wrong continued to gnaw at me. Deciding it was time to leave and report that the building was secure, we stepped back out of the office. That was when the atmosphere changed in an instant. The corridor, which had been swallowed by darkness, was now brightly lit by the elevator's glow. The contrast was so stark that it took a few seconds for my eyes to adjust. I glanced at Henry. He was white as a sheet. "What is it?" I asked, a shiver running up my spine. "Those doors we just checked. They weren't all locked," he said, his voice trembling. I turned to look down the hallway, and my heart nearly stopped. Every single door that had been locked just moments ago was now wide open. The feeling of being watched returned with full force, and it felt as though some unseen pressure was pushing us out of the building. We began our investigation of the rooms once more, but each open door led us back to the same empty offices we had just explored. Yet, the feeling of being watched intensified, and it was clear that something was amiss. Henry and I exchanged glances, both sensing that this building held something profoundly unsettling. When we finally decided it was time to leave, we made our way to the elevator. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed down the hallway, and a door slammed shut with tremendous force, plunging us into an eerie silence. Our radios erupted with static, making communication nearly impossible. Panic seized me. It felt as though the building itself was warning us that we needed to leave. Without another thought, we dashed into the elevator and pressed the button to descend. The doors closed agonizingly slowly, as if some unseen force was trying to prevent our departure. When we finally reached the ground floor, we hurried to the exit. I looked around for the locksmith to express my gratitude and share what had happened, but he had vanished. The doorman, who had been absent, suddenly reappeared and looked at us in confusion. "Did you see the locksmith?" I asked, struggling to maintain my composure. The doorman frowned and replied, "Locksmith? He hasn't arrived yet. I just spoke with the service center, and they said he's on his way. He should be here in about 5 minutes." A wave of panic washed over me. How could that be? I insisted, describing the man who had let us in and unlocked the door. The doorman stared at me, bewildered, and asked me to call the service center again. When I did, the response deeply unsettled me. The service center confirmed the locksmith was still en route. It was impossible for someone else to have shown up earlier. When the real locksmith finally arrived, a woman I didn't recognize, I was at a loss for what to believe. She asked me to describe the man who had assisted us, and I did. Graying hair, middle-aged, a serious demeanor that had initially seemed ordinary but now felt heavy with secrets. Her expression darkened as she paused. "You just described the doctor who used to rent an office on the second floor. He took his own life at home a few days ago." A chill coursed through me, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. I wanted nothing more than to flee from that place. Henry, my partner, was equally shaken, which was unusual for him. After that day, nothing felt the same. The building, with its dark corridors and hidden stories, became a place I steered clear of at all costs. No matter what transpired, I knew I would never return. In the days that followed, the incident lingered in my mind. While on duty, I spoke with other officers and was surprised to discover that we were not alone in our experiences. There were numerous accounts of strange occurrences in that building. Stories of unsettling presences, disembodied voices, and shadows moving along deserted hallways. The tale of the doctor who had taken his own life spread quickly among our colleagues, and soon everyone was aware that the building housed more than just medical offices. Something supernatural lurked within its walls, trapped there. Over time, I came to see that the doctor's spirit didn't seem malevolent. Rather, it felt as though he was trying to protect us, possibly as a last act of redemption for something from his past. Other officers reported encountering a presence that warned them of imminent danger and even saved their lives. Still, the thought of returning to that building filled me with dread. The feeling that something was watching and waiting in the shadows was too much for me to bear. I knew that if I were ever called back, I wouldn't have the courage to walk inside again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the memory never faded. Even now, if a call comes in for that building, I ask another officer to cover for me, and whenever I share this story, I always conclude with the same warning. If you ever receive a call for that building, stay alert, you might not be alone. I was never someone who subscribed to the ideas of the supernatural. I had always approached ghost stories, apparitions, and mysterious occurrences with skepticism. In my eyes, the universe was a logical entity governed by physical laws and tangible proof. But on that fateful night, my perspective shifted, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of uncertainty regarding my rational beliefs. Perhaps there were indeed things that lie beyond our comprehension. It was a winter evening in Maplewood, and I was wrapping up my shift when I received a peculiar call. Dispatch informed me of an elderly gentleman residing in an old, tranquil neighborhood who claimed to have seen a little girl running in his backyard at night. He was worried she might be up to no good, possibly vandalism or even breaking in. Naturally, I was skeptical. I assumed the elderly man might simply be imagining things, perhaps due to his advanced age, or it could have been a prank by local kids trying to frighten him. Regardless, it was my responsibility to investigate, so I hopped into my patrol car and made my way to the address. As I drove, the weather turned ominous. The sky, which had been merely cloudy, quickly darkened into a threatening mass. Within minutes, a storm erupted, unleashing torrential rain, accompanied by lightning and thunder that rattled the ground. The rain hammering against the windshield and the flashes of lightning cast an eerie glow, while the thunder rumbled around me, making it feel as if the very heavens were breaking apart. I arrived at the man's house around 11 p.m. The aging structure showed signs of wear, though it remained sturdy. The front yard was overrun with tall grass and wilted plants, while lights glowed warmly inside, revealing the gentleman's anxious silhouette through the living room window. Parking in front of the house, I dashed to the door, trying to shield myself from the downpour. The elderly man, likely in his 80s, opened the door with shaking hands, fear evident in his eyes. He wore a threadbare robe and was wrapped in a woolen shawl, seemingly trying to defend himself from not just the cold but something else, something unseen. "Thank you for coming, officer," he said in a frail, quivering voice. "She's out there again, running through the yard. I'm so scared." I tried to offer reassurance, telling him I was there to help and would check the backyard to ensure everything was all right. Still visibly distressed, he pointed toward the back door leading outside. "It's that way," he murmured. I walked through the house to the back door, attempting to push aside the growing sense of unease bubbling within me. When I reached the door, I tried to turn on my flashlight, but the battery seemed weak. Nevertheless, I opened the door and stepped outside, feeling the cold rain sting my face. "Is someone out here? Come on out," I called, my voice nearly swallowed by the storm. I waited a moment, but there was no response. Only the rain and the thunder resonated through the trees surrounding the house. I glanced around, attempting to see through the darkness and the sheets of rain, but noticed nothing out of the ordinary, no movement. All I could see were the reflections of the house lights swirling on the puddles accumulating on the ground. Deciding to return inside, thinking perhaps the woman had misjudged the situation, I closed the door behind me. That was when I sensed that something was amiss. The elderly woman, who had been anxiously anticipating my return, was now curled up in a corner of the living room, visibly trembling, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't perceive. "She's inside the house," she whispered, her voice barely audible but laden with fear. My heart raced as I turned to face the hallway leading to the back of the house, and before I could comprehend what was occurring, I heard a thud coming from that direction. Aiming my faint flashlight down the corridor, I spotted something that caused me to freeze. A young girl, roughly 13 years old, was darting back and forth, moving too rapidly to be simply a prank. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her clothing appeared outdated, something a contemporary teenager wouldn't wear. I pursued her, calling out for her to halt, but she continued to run as if she couldn't hear me. Then, without warning, she vanished right before my eyes. I stood there, shocked, my rational mind racing for an explanation that wouldn't arrive. I continued to think that maybe it was a trick of the light or my eyes deceiving me, heightened by the tension and the dim flashlight. Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard the woman scream again. "There! She's out there now!" I turned toward the window overlooking the yard, and there she was again, the girl, sprinting through the backyard and illuminated only by the sporadic flashes of lightning slicing across the sky. But how could that be? How could she have passed by me and exited through the back door? I bolted toward the door, determined to find a logical explanation. When I opened it and stepped back into the downpour, the girl had already disappeared. The yard was empty, save for the sound of the rain and the rustling trees. I rummaged through every corner but found nothing. No footprints in the damp soil, no evidence that anyone had been there. Returning inside, I felt frustrated and perplexed, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. The old woman remained trembling in the corner of the living room, her eyes wide with terror. I realized there was no way to completely reassure her, so I attempted to provide at least a somewhat comforting explanation. "I think she ran off," I lied, forcing my voice to sound assured. "She must be a local girl playing a prank, and with all this rain, it's too difficult to catch her. I'll ensure the neighbors keep an eye out, but I don't think this will occur again." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. To be honest, I wasn't either. The sensation that something was profoundly wrong in that house lingered that I suggested that she try to rest and then said goodbye, hoping the night would pass quickly. A few months passed as I continued with my work, attempting to forget that night. Life proceeded, yet the image of that young girl sprinting through the yard and vanishing from view stayed etched in my mind. I refrained from discussing the incident with my coworkers, certain that I'd be mocked. It was challenging to confess that something had unsettled me, especially as a police officer. Then, on a typical morning at the station while I was reviewing reports, I received surprising news. The elderly woman who owned the house where I had responded to the call had died of a heart attack. They reported she was found in the living room, the same area where she had been quaking with fear that night. The news struck me hard because, although I had never subscribed to the idea of the supernatural, the link between that night's events and her passing was undeniable. Shortly afterward, I learned the house had been sold, and a young family had moved in, a couple with 2 small children. The place that once seemed so eerie and mysterious was now brimming with life again. They planted flowers in the yard, repainted the outside, and the lights glowing from the windows brought new energy to the home. I felt a sense of relief, thinking perhaps this new vitality would dispel whatever shadows lingered there. However, my relief was short-lived, as not long after, the dispatch received another call from that same address. The new occupants reported seeing a young girl running around the yard with an identical description. A girl about 13, dressed in outdated clothing, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. Furthermore, the couple also noted that the girl wasn't limited to just the yard. On several occasions, they saw her inside the house, appearing in their children's rooms or in the hallway. When the station informed me about the call, chills ran down my spine, and memories of that night flooded back. I realized I couldn't face it again, leading me to make a decision I never anticipated. I let another officer take over. It wasn't easy, but I recognized I couldn't return to that place after what I had witnessed and felt. Perhaps it was cowardice, but it was a choice I could accept. I continued with my responsibilities, trying to push it all from my mind, yet deep down, I understood I would never fully erase those memories. Thus, the mystery of that house remains for me. It was the first and only moment I ever questioned the reality I thought I understood. Since then, I do my utmost to avoid dwelling on what may or may not exist beyond what we can perceive. It was a suffocating night in a peaceful area of Brooksville. The air felt heavier than usual, and a sense of unease lingered with me throughout my shift. I was in the final hour of my patrol, already contemplating heading home, when I noticed a car zooming past at an excessive speed. I activated my siren, and after a few moments, the driver finally pulled over to the side of the road. The street was deserted, illuminated only by the headlights of passing cars and the distant glow from a convenience store. Thick clouds covered the sky, obscuring the moon and adding to the oppressive atmosphere. As I exited my patrol car, a strange feeling of apprehension washed over me, as though something was off. The man behind the wheel appeared nervous, a common reaction in situations like this, but there was something about the tension in the air that felt unusual. Unsure how to proceed, I hesitated, struck by the sensation of imminent danger. Opting for caution, I returned to my vehicle, where my loyal partner, Max, a sturdy German shepherd, awaited me. Just as I turned back, an unexpected cold breeze swept through, completely out of place on such a muggy night, causing chills to ripple down my spine. Then I heard the passenger door of my cruiser slam shut. Confused, I looked inside, thinking I had locked all the doors before stepping out, and to my astonishment, there was a woman seated in the front passenger seat. She wore a police uniform similar to mine but appeared slightly outdated, as though it belonged to another era. She was young, probably around my age, her expression calm, yet her eyes reflected deep sadness. What struck me as odd was that I hadn't called for backup on the radio and hadn't seen any other police vehicles in the area. Max, usually calm and well-trained, began to growl and bark fiercely at the woman, an unusual reaction implying a real threat. "Hello?" I said, striving to keep the fear from my voice. "Can I help you?" She met my gaze with unsettling calm and said, "There's a gun under the driver's seat." Her voice was steady, and a chill washed over me. Instinctively, I turned to verify that the vehicle I had stopped was still there. When I looked back into my cruiser, the woman had vanished. No sound of the door opening or closing, no sign she had ever been there, except for Max's agitated behavior. He continued growling at the now empty seat. My heart raced, but I knew I had to act decisively. Returning to the suspect's car, my hand hovered over my weapon as I commanded the driver to step out, ordering him to move away from the vehicle and lie down on the ground. I swiftly searched the car, my hand gliding beneath the driver's seat, where I encountered the cold metal of a gun, precisely where the mysterious officer had indicated. Questions raced through my mind. Who was that woman, and how did she know about the weapon? I handcuffed the man without hesitation, despite his protests that he had no knowledge of any gun. I wasn't going to take any risks. After a brief struggle, I secured him and brought him to the station. The revelation upon checking his identity was even more shocking. He was a fugitive wanted for a cold case involving the murder of a young police officer that had occurred 2 decades earlier. He had vanished after the crime, and the police had never managed to locate him. The weapon he possessed was the same one used in the murder. The case had been widely covered in the media at the time, but, like many unresolved cases, eventually faded from memory. As the prisoner was escorted to his cell, a heavy atmosphere enveloped the station. My colleagues, aware of the unusual circumstances of the arrest, spoke with a mix of surprise and respect. News spread quickly, and everyone was astonished by the bizarre events, leaving even the most skeptical among us grappling with what had transpired. Later that night, still trying to process everything, I headed to the station's parking lot, with Max by my side. He seemed calmer, yet there was still something different about his demeanor, as if he too had been affected by what we had witnessed. I attempted to distract myself by playing a game of fetch with him, trying to shake off the unsettling memories of the night. That's when I saw her again, the same officer standing just a few yards away. This time, her expression was serene. She looked more tangible, more present, even though I still sensed I was encountering something beyond rational explanation. Her uniform appeared sharper, every detail more defined, as if she were fully materializing before me. "Thank you," she said with a gentle smile that illuminated her face in an almost ethereal way. Stunned, I struggled to find my voice. "No, thank you," I replied, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. "You saved my life." Her smile widened a bit as she nodded. "I was only doing my job. He would have killed you with the same gun he used to kill me." With those words, she began to fade away, but not abruptly this time. Her image gradually dissolved until nothing remained but the stillness of the night. I was left standing there with Max, lost in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. In search of answers, I decided to delve deeper into the case of the slain officer. I learned her name was Evelyn Reed, a dedicated young woman who joined the force at just 22. Known for her courage, she always volunteered for the most perilous assignments and earned the respect of her peers. Her murder notably unsettled the police community. She had been investigating a series of robberies on the town's outskirts when she was violently attacked and killed. Her body was discovered in an alley, and the murder weapon was never recovered, leaving investigators frustrated. As time passed, the case went cold, especially after all leads disappeared and the perpetrator remained unidentified. I spent countless sleepless nights trying to piece together why Evelyn had suddenly appeared to me after 20 years, especially at that precise moment when her killer resurfaced with the same firearm. How had she known he was close by? These questions plagued me, yet I also felt an unusual sense of calm, as if I had been part of a mission I never knew existed. I began to sense a familiar presence when I found myself in perilous situations, as if someone was watching over and protecting me. My dog, Max, seemed to pick up on this too. During tense moments, he would become unusually alert, waiting for some sign. There were nights on my late patrols when a chill would sweep through, even on warm evenings, almost as if Evelyn were there with me. Some colleagues remarked on my newfound introspection and inquired about the change in me. I simply smiled and attributed it to the weight of responsibility, but deep down, I understood there was more to it. I believed Evelyn was still watching over other officers like me, perhaps seeking some form of redemption for the tragic end to her life. One evening, during a solo patrol, I paused at a memorial dedicated to fallen officers. Evelyn's photo was displayed alongside a brief summary of her story and the circumstances of her death. I stood in quiet reflection for several minutes, and a gentle breeze swept over me, imparting an unexpected sense of comfort. In that moment, I realized that wherever she was, she had finally found peace. That night, I returned home feeling as if I had been part of something far greater than myself, something that reached beyond our normal understanding. Life continued, but Evelyn's memory remained ever present. I came to understand that whenever I faced doubt or danger, she would be there to guide and protect me, just as she had tried to fulfill her own duty. Over time, my bond with Max deepened. He seemed to develop a sixth sense, detecting Evelyn's presence before I did. Occasionally, he would fixate on an empty space as though seeing something beyond my perception. In my heart, I knew he sensed her too, and this brought us closer together. Years went by as I continued my work in law enforcement. I shared Evelyn's story with a few trusted colleagues. While some were skeptical, they listened with respect, recognizing that something extraordinary had transpired, even if they couldn't articulate it. For me, her presence became a wellspring of strength and inspiration, a constant reminder that even in our darkest times, there is something greater watching over us, connecting the realms of the living and the departed. It was a sweltering summer afternoon in Orlando when I got the call to look into the disappearance of a young woman in a suburban neighborhood. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting hues of orange and pink across the sky, yet the heat clung to the air, creating a muggy and oppressive atmosphere. Upon arriving at the location, I encountered an old house that appeared to have been constructed in the early 1900s. Its exterior was somewhat weathered by time but still commanded attention. The front yard was well kept, adorned with vibrant flowers and neatly trimmed grass. But there was something unsettling in the air, perhaps the shadows cast by the large trees encircling the house or the sense that this place had held countless secrets over the years, only visible to the ancient walls. I couldn't shake the feeling, but as an officer, I needed to remain focused on my duties. At the door, I was met by a middle-aged man with a fatigued expression and dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. He introduced himself as Mark, the father of the missing girl. His hair was beginning to gray at the temples, and an aura of hopelessness surrounded him, as if he was grasping for every bit of hope left. "Thank you for coming, officer," he uttered in a worn voice. "My youngest daughter, Lily, didn't return home last night. I've called all her friends and checked all her usual spots, but no one has seen her since yesterday afternoon. I'm getting desperate." I gestured for him to calm down and asked him to take me inside so I could gather the information needed to initiate a missing person report. As I crossed the threshold, I was immediately struck by a heavy feeling, as if the atmosphere inside was different from the world outside. The house, while well cared for, seemed to carry a dense, almost palpable energy. We settled down at the living room table, and I started asking the standard questions. Mark patiently answered them, although his gaze often wandered off, hinting he was replaying the last moments he had with his daughter. He told me Lily was 17, responsible and caring, with no history of running away or family issues. As I took notes, I observed how eerily silent the house was, the only sound being the relentless ticking of an old wall clock, its rhythm marking time with unforgiving precision, intensifying the tension with every second. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hallway swung open, and a young woman stepped out. She looked to be around 20, her dark hair drawn back in a messy bun, dressed in a faded t-shirt and jeans. Her wide, dark eyes seemed to absorb the light around her, and her expression was one of shock. "Mom!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with astonishment and emotion as she pointed toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Mark immediately leaped up, his face drained of color, and dashed toward the hallway, calling out, "Mom!" The desperation in his voice hinted at his search for someone he never expected to see again. I rose instinctively and followed him down the hallway, my mind racing to comprehend what was happening. All I could think about was how unusual this situation was. Mark halted abruptly in the corridor and turned to me, his anxiety palpable. "Did you see her? Did you see my mother?" His visible distress made my heart race. Glancing around, I tried to make sense of the scene. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just a series of closed doors. "No, I didn't see anyone," I replied, still puzzled by the unfolding events. "Why are you so surprised to see her?" Mark seemed to struggle to find the right words, finally whispering almost inaudibly, She passed away last year." His voice faltered as he grappled with the reality of his own statement. The revelation washed over me like ice water, freezing me in place as I tried to understand its meaning. "You mean you've been seeing her around the house?" I asked, Mark nodded slowly. Yes, ever since she died, we've all seen her. My oldest daughter, Bianca, encounters her more frequently. It's as if she's still present, looking after us. The explanation felt surreal, yet the sincerity and fear in Mark's eyes were undeniable. The notion that his mother's presence, or perhaps her very soul, was lingering in that house was deeply unsettling. I glanced down the hallway again, as if expecting to see something that would validate Mark's words, but nothing stirred. The atmosphere felt even denser, charged with an invisible energy. "Officer, please," Mark interrupted my thoughts, desperation in his gaze. "I know this sounds insane, but do you think this could have anything to do with Lily's disappearance?" I was at a loss for how to respond. As a police officer, I was trained to handle facts and solid evidence. Not the supernatural, but the intensity of the moment made it hard to dismiss what was unfolding. The atmosphere had shifted, making the house feel even more silent, as if the furniture itself were quiet in reverence for what had just happened. I continued filling out the report, but my mind was elsewhere, focused on what I had just witnessed. The uneasiness I felt was so intense that I briefly considered stepping outside to finish the report where the air was less dense and suffocating. Just as I was about to make that decision, Mark's eldest daughter, Bianca, re-entered the living room, still looking in shock. She sat next to her father and began to share more about her grandmother's appearances. Bianca recounted waking in the middle of the night, sensing someone beside her bed. When she opened her eyes, she would see her grandmother's silhouette in the dark, quietly watching over her. Although the initial fright was unsettling, Bianca said her grandmother's presence always felt protective, as if she were there to watch over them. "You know, officer," Bianca said, her voice shaking, "it's strange, but it feels like she's trying to communicate something to us, like she's still concerned about us. Ever since she passed away, the house has never felt the same. It's as if she left a part of herself here. Sometimes it's comforting, but at other times, it's terrifying." I tried to reassure them by stating that we would do everything in our power to find Lily, suggesting that perhaps these sightings were manifestations of their grief for their mother and grandmother. However, I was grappling with my own skepticism. What they described felt too real to simply dismiss as mere figments of the imagination. I quickly finished the report and stood up. "I'll need a recent photo of Lily for the investigation," I said, maintaining a professional demeanor. Mark promptly went to a room and returned with a picture of his daughter, taken at a family gathering not long ago. As I studied the photo, I saw a bright, smiling young woman full of life. It was hard to imagine her vanishing without a trace, and even harder to consider that her disappearance might somehow be connected to the strange events in their home. Stepping out onto the front porch to review my report one last time, I felt an immediate sense of relief as the fresh air hit me. The tension inside started to dissipate, but concerns about Lily and the mystery of her grandmother's appearances still weighed heavily on my mind. While waiting for the patrol car to pick up the report and take it back to the station, I began to reflect on what I had witnessed. Could it be possible that Lily's grandmother was trying to send a message? Was her spirit restless, attempting to protect the family from something unseen? Glancing back at the house, I noticed Mark watching me through the window with a mixture of concern and gratitude. He clearly trusted me to bring his daughter home, and that responsibility pressed heavily on me. Despite my doubts, there was something about him that made me want to believe his story and find a link between their experiences and Lily's disappearance. When the patrol car arrived, I submitted the report, recommending that the case be treated with urgency. However, as I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder one last time at that house, which now seemed filled with secrets. In the days that followed, the search for Lily continued without any success. Each new lead led nowhere, deepening the mystery. Mark and Bianca reported sightings of their grandmother more frequently, as if something was on the verge of happening. Then, a week later, something inexplicable occurred. I received a call from Mark, and his voice sounded different, calm, as though a change had taken place. "Officer," he said, "I don't know how to explain this, but Lily is back. She just showed up at home this morning as if nothing had happened." What do you mean she just came back? I asked, baffled. She doesn't remember anything. She says she was just walking down the street and suddenly found herself in front of our house. She's confused but safe. And you know what's even stranger? Ever since she returned, we haven't seen my mother anymore. It's like she was waiting for Lily to come back so she could finally rest in peace. I was stunned. How could a young woman disappear for a week and then reappear without any memory of what had happened? And how could we explain the sudden absence of the grandmother? I went back to Mark's house to talk to Lily and check on her condition. She seemed fine, albeit disoriented. When I asked where she had been, she shook her head, puzzled. I don't know. I just don't remember anything. It's like I've been asleep this whole time. As I left, I said my goodbyes to Mark and Bianca, who appeared relieved but still shaken by everything they had endured. I knew I would never fully understand what had transpired during that week, but one thing was undeniable. Something beyond human comprehension had occurred there. Over the years, I continued to ponder that case. The sightings, Lily's disappearance. Some things simply can't be explained, and perhaps that's the essence of the unknown. The mystery of life after death and the connection between our world and whatever comes next.